Hello everyone and welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be building a fun little application which is going to give us activities based on a random generating API. So the API that we're going to be using is called the board API, and the app that we're going to be building is this one right here, and you can easily integrate this into your own website. So a demonstration of what we're going to be building, I have a button in the middle here which when I click is going to show another component here that says sorry for being bored, and then you can use the button to generate an activity, and then you're going to get a list of cards with the activities that you can do. So for example, when I click on generate activity, then it generates this activity, and then it also shows this nice little toast on the bottom, and we're going to be doing this as well. So you can see that it generates this activity. So learn the periodic table, the type of activity it is, the number of people needed, and then it also generates a link, or rather it adds in a link if the activity has a link. So let me look for one that doesn't have a link, and you can see when it doesn't have a link, then it doesn't show that third article or that third card that we have. So it's a fun little application. We're going to be using the board API. So it's called the board API, and this is the GET request that we're going to be sending. So when I open this up on a new tab, you're going to see that we're going to be getting back an object, and then we're going to get some keys and some values inside here. And this is what we're going to be using to populate our application. And then finally, just like I mentioned, we're going to be using React Toastify to get that nice little looking toast notification on the bottom. So to begin, what I've done is I've created a new React application by saying npx create React app, and I've called it board-yt. So you can go ahead and do that to generate your new React application. And then once it opens up, you can say code board-yt, which is going to open up an instance of Visual Studio Code into this folder. So enter. And then once it opens up, you can see that we have the default file structure for a React application. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and install React Toastify, which is the package that we know we are going to need. So I want to install it right away. So I'm going to say npm install react-toastify. And then I want that when this finishes installing, I want to run my local development server. So I'm going to say npm run start. So this is the double ampersand. And then I'm going to say enter. And then as that is running, if this will stop hanging, I did not intend for that to rhyme. So as that is running, let's go ahead and let's open up our app.js, and then inside the app.js, we're going to have the default file structure. So I'm going to select everything and just delete it. And then I'm going to say export default. Really? Now what are these? So annoying. Oh my god, will you? Okay, there we go. So I'm using an extension that is called ES7 plus React Redux and React Native Snippets, which allows me to do RFC, and it generates a React functional component and exports it as default. So inside here, what I want to render is the following. I just want to build up the UI first. So let me actually can close this so that I can open this up so that we see what we're going to be doing. Let's reload it. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to create this button. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to create a div, and then inside this div, I'm going to place my button. Now this button is going to say I'm bored, and I'm going to give it a class name, and I'm just going to say btn. And then the div, I'm going to give the class name of btn-container and save it. And then once we have that, then let's go ahead into our index.css so that we can style all this. So I'm going to remove everything first of all, and then I'm going to select my asterisk, and I'm going to reset the margin to 0, reset the padding to 0, and reset the box sizing. If I can type it, so box sizing to border box, so that it uses the CSS box model. And then for the body, oh my god, what am I typing? For the body, I'm going to specify a font family of Lucida Sans, And then I'm also going to specify a background color of hashtag 111827, which is a dark gray. And then I'm going to go inside the btn container and get the button. And for the button, I'm going to say give it a background color of hashtag 10b581, which is this green color. And then I'm going to say change the text color to white. And then I want to have a padding of 1 rem on the top and bottom and 2 rem on the left and right. And then let's remove the default border that it has, so border none. And then let's increase the border radius to about 0.625 rem, which is 10 pixels by default if you haven't changed the default rem value. And then I actually need this to open up so that I can see what I'm styling. So let it open up, and it should be just about now. So let's go into localhost 3000, and we should be able to see it in a few. So we have this, and then let's also specify that the font family should be Lucida, or rather let's just say inherit, because we know that it's going to inherit from the parent, which is going to be the body. So once our application opens up, you can see that we have our green button here, but obviously it's a bit smaller and we need it to move to the center. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go below this, and I'm going to increase the font size to 1.25 rem, which is going to increase the font size here. And then I'm going to increase this to 3 rem for the padding on the left and right. And then now we need this to come to the center. So the way we do that is by going inside the btn container. So the container that holds the button, so this one. And then we are going to say this. I'm going to say display this as a flexbox. And then I'm going to say align item center and justify content to the center, and this should move it somewhere here. But then now we need it to move to the absolute center, right? And the way we do that is very simple. We just add a height here and say 100 viewport heights, which is going to be 100 viewport heights of the device width. So even if you shrink this downwards, then it's still going to calculate 100 viewport heights, and it's always going to place the button in the middle. Okay, now that we have that, then the next thing that we need to do is let's add a hover for the button. Let's say that on hover, we want the background color to go into this very same green, but a bit darker. So let's say around here. And then let's add a transition. So transition the background color by 0.2 seconds. And then let's say ease in out. And then let's change the cursor to pointer. And we're going to have that. That looks nice. Now, the next thing that we need to do is we need to build our component here, which is going to show when we click on the button. So right away, let's go ahead and create a new component. So inside the source folder, we're going to create a new file, and we're going to say board.js for the name of the file. And then I'm going to say export default function board. And then for now, let's just go ahead and return an h2 that says I'm bored. And then save it. And then back inside our app.js, I'm going to render it below the div, and I'm going to render the board component, so that now we should be able to see our component right around here. Obviously, the color isn't the best one, but we can see that the component is working. And just so that we can see this, then let me style it out to be white in color. So inside here, I'm going to say that for the h2, I'm going to change the color to white, and we should be able to see it right there. Now, what we need to do is we want that when you click on this button disappears, and then this one shows up. So let's go inside our app.js, and then on top right here, we are going to import a hook from React that is called useState, which allows us to manage state in our application. And so we're going to create our state value here, and we're going to call it show board, and set show board is going to be the function that controls our state value. By default, we want it to be false because we don't want to be able to see this component when the application loads in. And then we are going to use what is called short circuit rendering, meaning we're going to grab this component and cut it out, and then we're going to place a condition using curly brackets, and we're going to say that only when show board is true with a double ampersand, that's when we want the board component to show up. So I'm going to save this and it's going to disappear, right? Because by default, show board is false. But if I change this to true, then our application, our component is going to show up here. So that is technically working, but not quite yet. We want that when this is true, then this should disappear. And the way we do that is, once again, we just grab this entire thing, cut it out, and then we're going to say that when show board is false, and notice the negation here, the exclamation, when show board is false, that's when we want this to show up. So when I save this, we're going to see this component. I'm going to see our component, and then when this changes to false, we are going to see our button. So that is working correctly. Now we just need to attach the on-click event on the button so that when we click this, then it's going to change this state value. So the way we do that is just by going inside the button here and saying on-click, and then we're going to pass in our inline function and say set show board to true, meaning change this state value from false to true. So I'm going to save this, and then notice that when I click on this, now our component shows up and our application is working correctly. So now let's go ahead and start building up this component, and we're going to go inside the board.js, and then on top I'm going to say import use state and use effect from React, and then I'm going to set up our state values. So here I'm going to say let me say what activity. I'm going to call it activity and set activity. This is going to be equal to use state, and by default it's going to be an empty string. And sorry, this is not going to be an empty string, but it's just going to be empty. And then I don't think whether we're going to use the use effect, but let me just have it in for now. And so we're going to be getting the API. Oh, I already have it open. So we're going to be sending a GET request to this API, and notice that we are returning an object as the response. So let me go ahead and copy this link, and then inside here I'm going to create a function called get activity, and this is going to be an asynchronous function. And then I'm going to say const response. So const res is equal to await fetch, and we're going to be fetching from the link that I've just copied, and then the data that we get back, we're going to say await res.json, meaning convert it to JSON, and then want to say set activity into the data that we get back. And we know that the data here is just these how many items? These 6 items. So once you have that, then let's go ahead and call the function called get activity. And you know what, we are not even calling it here, we're going to be calling it inside the button that we're going to create. So for now, let's go ahead and structure this, and let's say return a section. Okay, section, and then inside this section let's have an h2 that says I'm sorry for being bored. What did they have as the text actually? Was it sorry for being bored? Okay, so sorry for being bored. And then below this we have a paragraph that says this. Let me just copy it and then paste it in. And then below this paragraph we have a button, and the button has the same styles as our other button, remember? So I'm going to give it a class name, and I'm going to say class name equals to btn, and it's going to say generate what activity. And then below this button we're going to have some other text, and this other text is going to say this. So let me just copy it and paste it here. And then finally below this button we're going to have a div which is going to be 4 articles. Now there are 4 of them because when I click on this, then it generates some activities. But remember, there's one that has a link somewhere. So if you get one with a link, then you're going to see why we need the 4th one. But I'm getting none with a link, really. Okay, there we go. So when we have a link, that's when you want to display this article. So that's how I have done it. So these 4 are articles, that's why I have 4 of them, and let's go ahead and create them. Now this first one is going to say activity name, so activity how do you spell activity? Activity name. I'm sorry, it's about 11 p.m. in the night, so that's why my brain is just a bit off. And then let's copy this down 4 more times. This is going to be the activity type, and then this is going to be the link. What did I say? Link to learn. So link to learn, but this is going to be dependent on whether we have the link or not. So for example, this one doesn't have a link. So for this one, for example, we don't want to display the third article. And then finally, for the fourth one, we have number of people needed. So number of people needed. And then we're going to have that. Now, let me go ahead and console log this. So console.log the data so that we know what we get back. And then on the button, I'm going to have an on-click event where I'm going to be calling this function that is called get activity. There you go. So that when you click on this button, then it triggers this get request. And that means that we don't need the use effect here. So let me save it, and then let's go inside our application here. Let me inspect it, and then we need to style this out. And then inside our console, now I want to click on this to see whether we get anything. And when I click, and you can see we get something here. So we get an activity, we get the key, we get the link, but this link is empty. So when the link is empty, we don't want to show this. And then we get the number of participants, so the number of people, and then the type of activity that it is. So that's looking okay. Now let's go ahead and let me, you know what, now that we're here, let's just go ahead and run everything. Remember that we're getting back an object, so we don't need to map over everything. But remember that we are populating our state value here that is called activity when we say set activity. So the way we access the data is by saying activity, which is the name of our state value here, and then dot, and then we go inside the API here. So we're going to say activity dot activity, which is the name of the activity. So activity dot activity, and then the type here is going to say activity dot type, which it comes from here. And then the next one, we're going to say activity dot link. So here we're going to say activity dot link, and then finally we're going to say activity dot participants. There we go. And then remember how we want this to be dependent on whether this exists. We're going to cut it out, and then we're going to place our curly brackets, and we're going to say that only when activity dot link exists, that's when we want this to render. And then we don't want it to render like this. Instead, we want it to render inside an actual link, so that when someone clicks on it, it goes to that link. So I'm going to cut this out and place it inside an anchor tag, and the href for this is going to go towards the link. So I'm going to say activity dot link, and then the text for it is going to say activity dot link, meaning just paste the link inside there. So we're going to save this, and we're not going to be able to see anything on the screen. That's because of how this is styled. So let's go ahead and fix that right away. So inside this section, let me give it a class name and call this section board. And then let's style it out in our index CSS. So I'm going to say that for the board, I want to give it a max width of 800 pixels, and then a margin of auto, and then I'm going to say a padding of, let me say, about 3 rem on the top and bottom, and 1.5 rem on the left and right. And this is going to move like that. And then let's say that for the board, you know, for the board H2 is actually here. So let me grab this, place it inside here. So I'm going to say for the board H2, the color is going to be white, and then the font size is going to be 2 rem. Let me see, or let me say 3 rem. That this is okay on large screens, but on mobile it's going to look horrible because we don't want this to happen on mobile. So let me reduce this to 2 rem, and then let me add a media query here and say that for a min width of 1024 pixels, meaning laptop size screens, then I want the board H2 to have a font size of 3 rem, and save it. And then inside the board class, let's go ahead and change the color into white for everything. Move this upwards, and this is going to change the color for everything. Nice. And then let's go ahead and separate all this out because we don't want it to look like this. So remember how we structured it inside here? We have the board class, which is the section, and then we have the h2, the paragraph, the button, and then this other paragraph, and then the div. So we can make this to be a flex box by going above this and saying display flex, which is going to break everything. And then we want the flex direction to go into column. So flex direction, change it to column, which is going to do that, take it back to its original layout. And then to separate them out, let's just add a gap of about 2 rem, which is going to separate them out like so. Okay, looking nice. And then now let's go ahead inside this div so that we can display this to be cards. And so I'm going to say that for the dot board class, I want to go inside the div, and then for the divs I want them to have a border of 1 pixel solid, and let me say hashtag EC, which is a light gray. And then actually not, I don't want that light gray. Let me say hashtag 111827, and then let's hover over this and then make this lighter, right around there maybe. Yeah, let's work with that. And then for the divs, I want to have a padding of 2 rem all around, so that we're going to have that. And you know what, I'm actually doing this wrongly. This should be inside the articles. So I want the articles to, and there we go. Yeah, so the articles, and then let me have a border radius of 0.625 rem all around. And then now I can go inside the dot board class and then inside the div and display them as a grid. And then I'm going to say grid template columns. The first one is just going to be 1 fractional column, but then when we get to larger screens, and I'm going to add another media query here, and I'm going to say at media for a min width of 768 pixels. Then I can remove this one because we've already declared it on top, and then I want this to repeat twice and 1 fractional column each. So that is going to say 1 2, but it doesn't. Board div grid template columns repeat white. Why won't you reading activity? Oh, okay, this is an error that we've just encountered. That's okay, that's okay. Okay, it seems as though we are going to have to fix that error. Now the reason why this error is happening is because this part is evaluating before this can run. So the way we fix that is by grabbing this div, cut it out, and saying that only when activity is true, meaning only when it has been filled, that is when we get, that's when we're going to say we want to display this div. So save it, and then now I can click on it and you can see that our application works correctly. So let's go ahead and generate an activity here so that you can see this. And wait a minute, this shouldn't be here. This text should only be here when there's nothing on the screen, when there's no activity on the screen. So what we want to do actually is we want to grab this paragraph, cut it out, and then change this into a ternary operator, so question mark, and then we're going to go right, where does this div end? Here. And we're going to go here and say place a full colon and then paste in the paragraph. So basically we're saying that when activity is true, we want to render this div, and when it is false, we want to render the paragraph. So save it, and we should be able to see that. There we go. So you can see that the paragraph disappears. Now, why isn't this displaying as a grid? Why are you not displaying as a grid inside the board div? The div should be a grid. Oh, wait a minute. Is it because of this? Or this should say 1 and 1 fractional column. Okay, why doesn't this work? Wait, border. No, border. Really? Spelling of all things. So there we go. So now we have our grids. And then let's go ahead and let me add a grid gap here. So add a gap of about 1 rem to separate everything out. You know what, I use 2 rem, so let me say 2 rem, and we are going to have that. And then we want that when you hover over this, then they pop up a bit. And so the way we're going to do that is inside the article, I'm going to say we need to have a hover for it. So let me grab this. And we're going to say that on hover, we want to transform and scale it up. And we're going to scale it up to 100 and let me say 103% maybe. How large is that? Too small. Let me say 105. And then let me add a transition. And then I want to transform the I want to transition the transform property by 0.3 seconds and is in out. And we're going to have that. There we go. And 0.3 seconds is a bit too slow. So let me say 0.2. Yeah, let's work with 0.2. And then let me go ahead and increase the line height for this. So let's go above here and say for the paragraph, let's say the line height is going to be 1.8. And actually that's not going to work because these are articles, they're not paragraphs. So let me move this upwards here to see whether that's going to work. Yeah, it does work. So let's remove this. And that looks okay. Is there anything we have left? We have the toast. So we want that when you click on this button, then this toast notification shows up. So let's add that in. And the way we do that is by going inside our board.js. And on top, we're going to say import toast and toast container from React Toastify. And then we also need to import the CSS file that styles this. And I can never remember the link to the CSS file. So that's why I have this open so that I can copy this link here. So copy and paste it here. And then now, instead of console logging the data here, we want to display a toast that says activity generated. And then we want to run our toast container, so toast container. And then we want the theme to be colored, meaning we want it to be filled with a color. And then the position is going to be bottom center. And then save it, and then you can test it out. So generate activity, and it should show up right there. Now, the reason why it is not green in color is because we need to give this a success state. So toast.success, and you can read more about React Toastify in their documentation. So let's try it out, and you can see that now we have this. So activity generated, looking nice. And then let's capitalize this text here. Let's capitalize the text. We can just go inside the articles here, and then you can say text transform, and let's say capitalize, and then move this upwards. And we're going to have that looks much better. Would you look at that? That looks amazing. So let me go ahead and commit this to GitHub, and then I think that is going to be the end of the video actually. And you know what? I've just realized something. Let me add a button here that goes back to the original state. So let me go where? Let's go inside the board. Let's go below this section. And then let's add a button here with a class name of btn that says go back. And then we want that when we click on this button, it triggers, remember the state value that we had here, show board? We want this to now go back to false so that this can do the opposite. So we're going to say that pass in our name function and say set show board to false. Now this is going to break because we don't have this state value inside this component, but we can pass it in as props inside here by destructuring and saying set show board. And then now it doesn't break, but still it doesn't work. You can see that because it detects this is a function, but it doesn't know where it comes from. So the way you fix that is by passing it in as a prop, and we're going to say set show board prop is equal to the set show board function that we have here. And I'm going to save this, and then now I can go back and I can go back and forth, and there we go. Probably we should move this to the center and then make it smaller. So let me go inside here, and then let me add some inline styling. So let me say style, and I'm going to say transform and I want this to scale. Can this work actually? Let me say scale to 70%. Will that work? Yeah, that works. And then now I want this button to cut out, and then I'm going to place it inside a div, and then this div is going to have a class name of, I'm going to say board-btn-container, so that I can move it to the center. And then I'm going to go to the bottom of this, and I'm going to say that for the board-btn-container, then I want the max width to be 800 pixels, and then I want the margin to be auto, which is going to move it here. There we go. And then probably, you know what, let me increase the margin on the top to about 5 rem, and then the margin on the bottom is going to be 0. So push it downwards just a bit so that it separates from this part, and we can generate activity, and there we go. That looks okay. Now let me go ahead and create a new repository here, and the repository, I'm just going to call it what? Let me call it, if this is going to load in, let me shut some things down. So let's shut this down. We don't have any errors. Let's close all of this, and then let's call this board-api-yt, and then create new repository, and then let's copy this link, and then let's begin to commit it to GitHub. So I'm going to say git remote add origin, and then paste in our link, and then git push. Actually, no, let's not push. First of all, let's first add git add package star, meaning package.json, and package lock as well. And okay, git add, not git package, git add package star, and git commit, and I'm going to say install react toastify, and then inside the source I'm going to say cd source, and then git add app.js git commit, and I'm going to say parent component, and then git add board.js git commit, I'm going to say fetch API data, and then git add index.css and git commit, and I'm going to say style-m style components, and then git push-u origin main, which is going to push it to GitHub. And then I'm also going to deploy this to Netlify, just so that you can have a demonstration of it. But I'm not going to do it in this video. I'm just going to do it outside the video. But yeah, once you reload this page, you're going to see that we're going to have the repository, and this is going to be the link to the repository. You can check it in the description as well. So that is going to be the end of the video, and if you enjoyed it, then please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.